Good evening and welcome to our second webinar in our series of the 18th edition draft for public comment. My name is Steve Walton and I'm the scheme manager here at NAPIT. With me tonight is Frank Bertie, NAPIT Trade Association Chairman and Technical Director, and Richard Townsend, the Technical Development Engineer here at NAPIT. They'll take you through the presentation. There will be time for questions at the end of the presentation, so please feel free to use the Ask a Question function, which for most of you will be in the right-hand side on your control panel. We'll do our very best to get through as many of these as we can at the end. You'll also find a copy of the presentation and a certificate of attendance in the handout section in the control panel, which you can download for your records. We'll leave a few minutes at the end of the session to give you time to do this if you wish. There'll be a short survey also at the end of the webinar, and we'd really welcome your feedback to make sure these webinars are as useful as possible going forward. So I'll pass you through to Frank and Richard to get things started.
Good evening, welcome. Myself and Richard are going to run through the parts 5, 7 and 8 of the 18th edition draft for public comment. Going over again, what does the DPC mean? This is a means for the electrical industry and involved stakeholders to review the proposed new 18th edition and to submit comments on the content of the new edition. This will allow JPL 64, the committee responsible for BS 7671, to review the comments we receive and for inclusion or to revise the wording to contain them within the new standard.
So where can you find the DPC? Well, in past DPCs have been available on both the IET and the BSI site. However, this time round it can only be accessed via the DPC, and the previous webinar will give you that information. And you can also, using the web address, as you can see on your screen now, where it is listed to allow online comments.
So how do we gain access to the DPC? Run over it again. The BSI draft website requires you to register by entering a few details to allow you to access the wording of the DPC. You can see from the previous webinar from the 6th of June how to register and how to comment on the DPC.
In addition to those requirements, some new ones have become available and that you will need to be aware of. Due to the huge size of the 18th edition DPC, BSI have had to split the document down into 4 specific parts: the foreword to part 4, part 5 to part 6, part 7 to the new part 8, and the appendices, so that you can allow you to be able to comment properly. Due to the current size of the complete document, it was slowing down and causing a lot of glitches. You can also now download the PDF draft by clicking the download button when you're on the scope screen and you've registered online.
It's an important stage, and there's 2 ways to register your comments. The first one is to make your comment and give it a proposed change. Without a proposed change, your comments will not be accepted. You submit your comments live and they're registered there and then. The second option is to make your comments, or if you have a number of comments to make, you could again come to them by proposed changes and you could save them to review them and submit or delete the ones you don't want to submit at a later date, as long as they're provided before the finish date of the DPC.
So what are the value of your comments? Your comments are hugely valuable. It's what the National Committee will use to gauge if the work they have done has been successful and useful in the real world. It's absolutely vital that you choose to save your comments and proposals and submit them. If you choose to save them and sort of build them up, go back, review them, take another look, that's fine. But you've got to bear in mind that you have to submit them online and send them live before the deadline. Failure to submit any of your comments or any of your proposals will mean that they will not be valid, they won't be looked at, and they'll be deleted from the database.
Right. Looking at the first section, we're looking at part 5, selection and erection of equipment. We have a regulation number 521.11.201, which has been moved to a different clause number and is now 521.10.202. The notes are being altered and clarified, and just to reflect that it's not the first time this clause appears in 7671. The difference on the standard is where it's referring to wiring systems shall be supported so they're not liable to premature collapse in the event of a fire. In the previous regulation, this referred to escape routes. Now this is going to apply to all wiring systems wherever they're installed, not just escape routes. And the notes refer to the reasons why it might hinder access or egress routes when you're evacuation or for firefighting duties, and it goes through the use of non-metallic clips and spaced steel copper clips.
523.9. There's been a very small minor change within this, and although it doesn't really change the meaning of the regulation, the word shall has been changed to may. Not significant, however, BS 7671 is a British standard, and therefore it is a requirement. So shall is the ideal word to be used and is what should be used. However, that's been changed to may. Although it doesn't terrifically alter the regulation, we feel it's a requirement that it should stay as shall.
Within table 52.3, there is a small change. It is significant because it clarifies the minimum cross-sectional area of a lighting circuit cable, and where it's used by small power units which might be connected to the same circuit. This gives the increased control systems available in the home clarification and will be a welcome inclusion. As you can see from the cable size on 1mm, see note 4, and note 4 refers to lighting circuits and associated small power using equipment such as bathroom extraction fans, and this will also apply to any home automation units that are connected to lighting circuits.
There's now been a change to regulation 527 1.3 and 1.4, whereby there has been a change in the acceptable cable types with the allowance and introduction of Euro class cables.
Within Chapter 53, and in our previous webinar, we discussed the change with the introduction of a new Chapter 46. And this is where the majority of the information concerning isolation and switching elements of Chapter 53 moved to. Now, Chapter 53 gives better clarification on overcurrent protective devices and the integration of RCDs. We have regulations 530.3.1 to 3.5 lays out requirements in general and common requirements clearly. 530.4.1 has introduced another regulation which asks you to take into account the manufacturing instructions. 531.2.2.201, this regulation can create confusion because it's listed under TN systems and it refers to TT systems, and it is repeated further down in 531.3.201 where it does refer to TN and TT systems under the TT. It looks like a duplication of a regulation and is also previously covered in previous regulations.
A new UK only clause worth noting is 531.31202. This will disallow any third-party manufacturer systems which would trigger an RCD. This is a UK only regulation, however it does not preclude the use of a test stream in accordance with Part 6. That is only a note and is therefore informative and not normative. We feel that that should be part of the regulation, but this is only a UK regulation.
Also within Chapter 53, we have a new UK only clause, which this is worth noting. So on the same slide or something. Apologies. Chapter 53, in our previous webinar we discussed Chapter 46 and the requirements for isolation and switching. We have a regulation which now gives 531.3. It gives better clarity on the types of RCDs that can be selected and the characteristics with the required locations as can be seen from the regulation below.
531.3.532 now gives requirements for installations requiring RCDs relative to their soil conditions. specifically TT installations. This is further clarified with a new table 531.1, which gives you maximum values of earth resistance against maximum rated residual operating currents of an RCD.
Also within Part 5, we have 532, Devices for Protection of Fire. This has been enhanced and has greater clarity and covers arc fault detection devices, AFDDs as abbreviation. These devices are for special situations only and must be specified for use only after an appropriate design requirement determines they are needed for a particular installation. And it details what they're for, where they're applied to, and a BSEN number that is applicable to the arc fault detection devices.
534 and 535, devices for protection against overvoltage and devices for protection against undervoltage. These two sections have been significantly enhanced to give greater clarity and requirements for both selection of those two types of devices, and would require your inspection to ensure that you are aware of all of the changes that are going to be coming.
Within 536, this is we're talking about coordination of electrical equipment. The main change in this section, or there are many changes, the main one here is 536.4203, which is a UK only regulation and can significantly affect the integration of components if it goes ahead within the 18th edition. Now, as you read through the regulation, it states that the BSEN 61439 series applies to components for mechanical and electrical devices within an enclosure. What it's stating within the regulation in the next sentence is the devices to be enclosed and incorporated in the enclosure or distribution board will be only declared suitable according to the assembly manufacturer's instructions or literature. This means only compatible equipment can be installed within any enclosure to that standard. This could have a significant change to anyone using bespoke and specialised equipment.
5365 is a new regulation and follows on from 536.4.203. It removes coordination of switching devices and overcurrent protected devices and just states documentation. Although this information may be required to comply with CDM regulations, and it may be useful to append that to the manufacturer's data to an EIC on initial verification, it's not always practical and should not be included in the regulations. Neither is it a requirement of 514.9.
Within 537, we have isolation and switching, and this has been altered to include several different changes for clarity and covering different requirements we have. The fireman switch is now moved to 537.4, again providing greater clarity on the requirements. It's also worth noting that many general isolation and switching descriptions and requirements have moved to the new Chapter 46, which we discussed in the previous webinar, and that is available on YouTube if you want to refresh your memory on that one. 537 also contains many clause heading and content changes, and a detailed examination of these requirements is recommended.
538 monitoring has changed to monitoring devices. This also includes much more guidance and requirements, and also incorporates a new annex, Annex 53, an informative annex giving devices and associated functions. Again, that is an informative annex.
Regulation 542.1201. This clause has been altered to require an earth electrode. This will have significant ramifications if it's accepted within the DPC, and require the installation of earth electrodes in all new installations regarding of earthing type. The TNS, TNCS will be a requirement for it. As you can see within the regulation, within the green writing there, it says additionally there shall be an earth electrode supplementing any earth facility provided by the distributor in accordance with one of the requirements of Regulation 542.2.3 to prevent the appearance of a dangerous touch voltage in the event of a loss of the main connection to earth. This is a provision to prevent any additional faults appearing on the system to reduce any effects of loss of supply within the installation of the main earth.
Moving on to Part 7, special installations or locations requiring particular requirements. 704 has a new UK-only regulation, 704.522.8.101, and gives requirements for mechanical protection of cables run across the roads, etc., to take into account the environment and the activities of a construction site.
Within Part 7 we have 708, and this refers to electrical installations in caravan and camping parks or similar type of locations. It's a change to tighten up the requirements of Part 7 within 708, and to make sure there's no understanding of the requirements of installation. Anything falling out of the scope would be covered within the general requirements of 7671. And as you look through it, it did put in the second sentence down, this section does not apply to internal electrical installations of leisure accommodation vehicles. As making it clear, it is to do with the installation of the caravan park or camping location, and not the internals of the caravan park, which is covered by another Part 7. And it also gives an additional note 3 that the electrical installations of residential park homes are covered by general requirements of 7671, together with any relevant particular requirements of Part 7 regarding the supply of those units.
Further changes to caravan and camping parks are 708 52171, which also gives you information on the preferred methods for feeding supplies to caravan pitches or tent pitches, and also underground cables. Interesting to note is note 1, whereby it's specifying a minimum depth with which to bury said cable at 0.6 metres. Again, these are to further clarify the requirements for caravans.
And continuing on with 708, they're talking about the additional requirements for overhead supplies, which are given below. They're talking about every overhead conductor shall be insulated, the poles shall be supported for overhead wiring to be located and protected so they're unlikely to be damaged by any foreseeable movement of vehicles. The overhead conductor shall be at a height above ground of not less than 6 metres, where they have movement of vehicles, and 3.5 metres in all other areas. This is to make sure any leisure vehicles or other vehicles do not damage any overhead cables.
721, installations in caravans and motor caravans, has been improved to give better guidance for protective measures which are allowable and those which are not allowable within a caravan. 721.413, electrical separation except for use by shower socket outlet is not allowed, and additional protection or residual current device not exceeding 30 milliamps is confirmed.
Within Part 729, electric vehicle charging installations, there are many changes to this part, and it goes with the choice and recommendation of the type of RTDs. These are important to note, the changes to these. And within the regulations, it is covering, except for protective measures of electrical separation, the charging points of its own RCD will be at least at type A, with the rating residual current of 30 milliamps. Each charging point will incorporate socket outlet or vehicle connector complying with the BSEN 62196 series, and protective measures against DC fault currents will also be taken. Appropriate measures shall be made for the connection points of these follows: an RCD type B or a type A, and appropriate equipment to ensure disconnection of supply in case of DC faults above 6 milliamps. RCDs will also comply with one of the following standards: the BSEN 61008-1, 6100-9.1, and BSEN 61947-2 or 62423. And its note does refer to requirements for selection and erection of RCDs in the case of supply using DC vehicle connectors shall be according to BSEN 62196 series. They are under consideration.
730, another new Part 7, onshore units of electrical connections for inland navigation vessels. Again, as I've said, it's a whole new Part 7 covering shore connections. If it is your area of work, as it's quite significant, we would advise you to make sure you pay particular attention to it and ensure that you are happy with any future changes which may come about from the DPC.
Another change within the Part 7 is 753, where it covered floor and ceiling heating systems. The title of this part now has been changed to heating cables and embedded heating systems. This has required a change of scope, and it broadens the inclusion of different kinds of equipment and installation types. This means the details of 753 have changed significantly, and the scope has been changed to cover this as well. And so, as you can see on the section here, the section applies to embedded electrical heating systems for surface heating. It also applies to electrical heating systems for de-icing, frost prevention, and similar applications. It covers both indoor and outdoor systems, and the heating systems for industrial and commercial applications complying with the parts BSEN 60519 and 62395 or 60079 are not covered under this regulation. And it has a note on there which gives examples of what type of systems are covered by this standard, and it refers to heating systems within walls, ceilings, floors, roofs, drain pipes, gutters, pipes, stairs, roadways, non-hardened compacted surfaces such as football fields and lawns.
And finally, Part 8, energy efficiency. A complete new part to PS7671, massive step change. We haven't had a new part for as long as I can remember. The new proposed Part 8 will cover energy efficiency requirements for an installation. It's not strictly an energy or electrical safety orientated part of 7671. It will require designers to spend much more time with their clients in order to understand the most efficient and effective way to install a new electrical installation. You'll be required to give design advice which points a customer towards maybe what could be more costly equipment, however be more efficient and therefore less costly in the long run. As I've said, again, this is a non-electrical safety part of the F7671.
Part 8, energy efficiency. As Richard has said, Part 8 is not for electrical safety. It is part of energy efficiency. And it's a part to be considered by the designer and by the client, depending on what the requirements are for that type of installation. So what does it mean to you? You need to understand what your client's prospective tariff structure is. So what type of bills they have. Is it off-peak heating? Is it commercial tariffs for different styles for either industrial or commercial or catering tariffs? They've got different styles. You need to understand what the client's requirements are. You need to consult with your client on the types of equipment they use and take into account if it's looking at more efficient types of equipment, if they're available. It could also be with your cables. It could be involved installing larger cables, which are have less heating losses within them. It will be more costly to install at the initial stages, but over the lifetime of the installation, they will provide savings for the client. You also need to understand the load reducing motor drives, such as various speed drives, how you could reduce the content and make them more energy efficient. You need to be aware of the power factor and how it affects the current usage within the installation and how to correct it for efficiency. You also need to know about harmonic frequency distortion, what causes it, what causes it effects on the installation, and how you deal with it, and how the client has to deal with it with different types of equipment, different type of installation methods. It's all to be discussed under this Part 8, which covers all different types of installations, from domestic right through to high industrial types of installations. So we've covered those parts 5, 7 and 8, and if you have any questions and would like to submit them through, we'll stay on and answer any of your questions. Thanks for taking time to listen to our comments on parts 5, 7 and 8. If you have any questions, we're here to answer them.
So we've had a couple of questions, Stephen. The first one is, how long are we going to give our members to gain the 18th edition once the qualification comes into effect?
At this moment in time, we don't have a clear indication of any particular qualification requirements for 18s. The training organisations are looking at that side of it. But it'll be a case of having an update of the 18th edition when you start, because it's published on the 1st of July 2018, comes into force on January the 1st, 2019, and you have to make use of it at that time. So up until January 2019, you'll need to have some kind of update CPD training courses for it, so you can make use of the 18th edition. When we have more clear information about the qualification requirements, we will send it around to you so you're informed of the dates you have to comply by.
Okay, another question. On supports in escape routes, does that mean all cables require metal clips?
No, it doesn't require all cables to have metal clips, but it requires that the cable should be effectively supported. Manufacturers' data for particular types of clips will give instruction on how often or the distance between a span in between any metal clips.
Okay, another question. If I were to put a surge device into a distribution board, does it have to be the same make?
Well, if that new regulation comes into force, yes, any equipment, surge protected device or other, if you're going to go up to a distribution board and put new equipment into an existing piece of equipment or even a new piece, then yes, the manufacturer or make would have to be the same, or the manufacturer of the distribution board or consumer unit or enclosure would have to give their permission for whatever make or type of equipment you were then going to put in there.
Okay, and with change to the requirement for earth electrodes, does this mean that all new installations are going to be TT?
It would require all installations to be TT. They'll still be classed as TNS or TNCS, but they will have a supplementary earth electrode. And within, this applies to domestic premises and with the increase of use of RCDs, anyway, to be protection, but it won't create a TT system. It will be a supplementary earth electrode, not the sole means of earthing for that installation.
Okay, another question. Why have I got to understand my client's build under Part 8?
You need to understand your client's tariff structure, specifically for, or more importantly, for industrial and commercial, so that you can understand what a prospective installation will be pitched at, what kind of load balances are going to be on that, because that will be where your client will be taking their tariff structure. If you fail to design properly, or they fail to understand how you're designing, and you go into the tariff above, or they go into the tariff above, it can have some significant cost implications to their business. So they're designing for a particular tariff, and they will want you to design equipment that will come beneath that, either soft starts, variable speed drives, etc., to ensure that you don't peak into the tariff structure above, and therefore incur massive or quite considerable cost implication of doing that in some cases. More industrial and commercial at this stage than it is domestic for that one.
Okay, another question. Does Part 8 apply to domestic premises?
Yes, Part 8 applies to all installations, commercial, industrial, domestic, everything.
The thing with Part 8 is for consideration. It depends on what type of installation your client wishes to have. It's not clear it must be compliant with Part 8. You have to determine what type of installation your client wishes to have. If they selected a fully energy efficient installation, then you would have to include the Part 8 requirements. If they weren't going to go for that and they didn't want to include any energy efficiency measures that are covered under Part 8, you don't have to include them within your installation design. But the client has, the discussion has to take place with the client to make sure they understand what the requirements are.
Okay, and that's all the questions we've had this evening so far. So thank you for joining us this evening. If you have any more questions that we didn't have time to cover, don't forget you can access the NAPIT Technical Helpline on 0345 543 0330, and there's also the online forum where you can discuss technical issues amongst yourselves at forum.napit.org.uk. We'll make a recording of tonight's webinar available tomorrow morning on our YouTube channel, and we'll leave the webinar running for a few minutes now to allow you time to download the certificate from the handout section. If you could fill out the survey once the webinar closes, we'd really appreciate your feedback. Future webinars will be announced on the online forum, on social media and via email, so keep an eye out for those. And once again, thank you very much for your time and enjoy the rest of your evening.